Well, Oklahoma gets the best transfer quarterback available, but they've got more problems to solve.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. This episode brought to you by friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Can Clemson pull it off? Oregon State with a stunning move at quarterback. I didn't see it coming, so we're going to discuss. But first, Jay Smith, Locked On Sooners. John Mateer is an Oklahoma Sooner. Jay, I think he was the best transfer quarterback available. This is a guy who just accounted for over 40 total touchdowns. He's got his same offensive coordinator in Ben Arbuckle. Lots of things to like, but when I watched Oklahoma this year, I'm going to be Debbie Downer for a moment. It wasn't just the quarterback that was the problem. Quarterback was a problem, no doubt about it. But quarterback wasn't the only problem. You had offensive line issues. I don't know if there are any receivers on Oklahoma's roster right now. I know there are, but those two things have to be addressed because Mateer is not going to just walk into the SEC and win you 10 games on his own.
Why not? I mean, we've seen it before happen in the SEC where one guy has carried a team all the way through into a national championship. It can happen. Let's not act like it's not happened before.
Which guy are you thinking of?
Cam Newton?
Cam Newton had a really good defense.
No, he did not.
I watched him in that national
Ted
championship game.
Roof was a defensive coordinator. What are we doing here?
I'm just saying. I watched that. By the way, the defense won that national championship game far more than Cam Newton did. Cam Newton was very good.
We'll give you that. But
I'll grant you that.
But the point is with that, no, Mateer's not going to do it by himself. And you're right. You raised the proper questions there. We dealt with injuries throughout the wide receiver room and the offensive line. Luckily, we now have guys that have experience that are second stringers that are about ready. Like, you don't like playing true freshmen, especially having them break in the SEC. Well, we did that. Some of them responded pretty good. They had some mishaps, but some responded really good. I mean, the Alabama game was a great example of young players figuring out, no, we're tired of this crap happening to us, and they did it. The good thing is that most of the starters, if not all, will be back, and they'll actually be healthy. So I expect both of our good tackles to be back. I expect us to have a really good set of guards. And our center, Troy Everett, who had the knee injury before the season started, as soon as he came back, he was nails the entire rest of the season after the Tennessee game. So the line will be figured out. Not concerned about that. Oh, yeah, you're bringing in five-star Michael Fasusi, top 100 tackle Ryan Fogier. So you'll have guys to be able to push everybody else up. So I think Mateer will be good. But to talk about wide receivers, you're right. So, I mean, Oklahoma just picked up its third wide receiver out of the transfer portal in Isaiah Satania from Arkansas. So you got a speedster. You got Giovanni Gibson, the big wide receiver that came from Arkansas Pine Bluff. Believe me when I say he put up numbers. That's all that matters. He put up production. And then you got Keontez Lewis, who came in from Southern Illinois by way of Wisconsin and UCLA. So veterans that are coming in that have actually put up numbers. You still got the young guys right behind them. So I think Mateer's going to have a fun time this time around here at Oklahoma.
Yeah, I wonder about how quickly it can mesh, because I think with a lot of transfer quarterbacks and transfer heavy sides of the ball across all of college football, is not unique to a conference or a team. It takes a while to mesh. You look at Oregon, for instance, go watch that offense for the first 2 weeks. Go watch the offensive line for the first 2 weeks. They were terrible. Idaho and Boise State tore them up, and then all of a sudden they're a finalist in the last three teams for the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in college football. So it can take some time, but I had a take that went over super well with Oklahoma fans, Jay, and that was that Miami's a better landing spot than Oklahoma, because I don't feel like you're rebuilding as much over at Miami, and I feel like you have a better opportunity to win games. This is the second straight year, and I imagine it will soften in 2026. Oklahoma's dealing with a gauntlet, Jay, and sure, I see the argument, and people came at me with the line of, well, if you're a competitor, you don't care, you want to play against them. That's all good and fine, But at the end of the day, you know what you want to do? Win football games. You know where the best players are? In the college football playoff. That's where the best teams are at. And Miami has a much easier path to get there than Oklahoma does. How much can Mateer change that calculus?
Now, I mean, if you want to go with the easiest path, sure, Miami gets you there. But if you want to go through the path that looks the best, Oklahoma's the place to be. I mean, if you go back and look at the games that Oklahoma lost this season, if they had a competent offense, I didn't say good, I said competent. One that knows how to not turn the ball over every single time you get a turnover, there's about 9 wins on that schedule. Easily. We had Tennessee where we needed them to be. We just kept giving it right back to them instantaneously. Ole Miss was struggling against us throughout the first half. We walked into halftime with the lead in that game. Missouri, I don't know what the heck happened in that game. That shouldn't have happened. But you add 3 more additional wins right there, there's a good chance Oklahoma's in that same conversation. So for me, I totally get what you're saying as far as the toughness of it. But this reminds me of when Oklahoma first hired Brent Venables and brought in Jeff Lebby. What Lebby did, he went and got the quarterback that knows the system, Dylan Gabriel. What did Dylan Gabriel do? He put up a top 10 offense in the country. The problem was they were starting to refresh on defense. Now that refresh on defense is here. I mean, statistically, and in defensive efficiency, Oklahoma was ranked number 7 in the country, right? Raw numbers, you've got yourself a top 20 defense. That in yards given up. That's exactly what you're looking for. And all this defense is going to do is get better because everybody's been in that system long enough to now know everything they need to do. Most of the guys have been in there 2 to 3 years. And so you're bringing a veteran presence on defense that should be able to mimic what they did last year. Now you're bringing a quarterback that brings competency. I didn't say he had to be good. A competent offense that doesn't give the ball up with leading the country in fumbles, giving up in the season 25. If you don't do that again, if you cut that in half, guess what happens? Oklahoma wins about 50% of those games. So from there, that's putting you at 9 wins. Then what?
That's a compelling argument. I tell you what, guys, he laid it out. He laid it out well. It's not as if everybody else is sitting on their hands and watching players go by in the transfer portal. Everybody else in the SC is making moves too. But correct me if I'm wrong, Mateer could have 2 years of eligibility if he wants them. Yep. And look, if he does really well at Oklahoma, he could go to the NFL, but I don't think he's a lock first round sort of guy. He's got a good arm. I think his mobility is maybe his strongest trait, but in the NFL, you got to be able to throw the football and do so consistently. So is this someone who you would like to see Oklahoma, who, by the way, had to have invested a sizable portion of NIL, however much it was? Because Washington State, I know it's up in Pullman. They don't have the same level of resources. I know for a fact, it has been reported by more than one place, it was a 7-figure NIL deal. So Oklahoma's dipping into the millions in NIL here. Do you think that if you were running that collective, Jay, would you go to John Mateer and say, hey, you could have a great year in 2025 and you could have NFL draft prospects, but if you do this for 2 years, we'll give you X amount and you can shore up the quarterback position? Because the whole revolving door thing, I think Brent Venables pretty tired of that after just 1 year of it.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And unfortunately, that's not something they're going to be able to negotiate right now, because once the new administration gets in and everything kicks in as far as the revenue share next summer, all of this is going to change. They're probably going to put restrictions on NIL, or at least eliminate collectives and force you to have to do marketing deals only. When that happens, then you may be able to finagle, funnel some money in some whatever capacity you try to figure out. But the bigger thing is, and you're right, he probably has a better chance, John Mateer does, when it comes to playing this year, showing out, and then coming back one more year and trying to really up his draft stock. But, I mean, he threw for 3,100 yards and he rushed for 800 yards last year. So 3,900 yards accumulated by himself with 44 total touchdowns. If he can duplicate that exact same performance, he will be in New York having a conversation about the Heisman. And then at that point, the NFL's not going to look at him and say, nah, I think there's too many. Now, somebody's going to be dumb enough to take him within the top 10. Not saying they'd be dumb to draft John Mateer, but that's how that works. NFL guys are a little bit easy to woo, especially if you do that in the SEC. Because think about it. The SEC is considered to have NFL caliber defensive coordinators and NFL caliber rosters. If that's the case, and he does mimic what he did last year, or at least very close to it in the SEC, he's guaranteed to be a top 10 pick next year.
Yeah, that's a jump though. The jump in
agree.
competition. I don't worry about him succeeding at Oklahoma or being able to make does he duplicate the numbers? 44 total touchdowns is a lot. 800 rushing yards is a lot. But hey, Jaden Daniels went Pac-12, SEC, and it all worked out. So why couldn't it for John Mateer? That's the optimistic side of me coming out right there for the Sooners fans. Jay Smith has got all the optimism in the world. Locked On Sooners, Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Next, we're talking Clemson and Texas. Jay's favorite team. Jay's favorite team, Texas. Here, let me throw you a bone as you depart the show, Jay. Texas needs to be careful. That's next. First, do you know why you need to check out Rocket Money? Because Rocket Money can help you find subscriptions you forgot about or have been paying for twice. That's something that they're going to be able to help you with. When you have subscriptions that they are aware of, but you are not, they're going to let you know, hey, you don't want to pay for this anymore. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place because, look, college football is all about realignment, consolidation. It's not good there. But with your finances, it is. Whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Then make sure you check out my friends over at Game Time. If you want to go to a playoff game or any bowl game that's taking place out there, Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better. I went to a comedy event in Las Vegas recently, got the tickets through Game Time. Boom, easy money. My buddy and I went, had a great time. Seats were great, and they've got a bunch of great features over at Game Time. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you are looking for. They give you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and their lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. I have one very clear message to say about Texas and Clemson. Don't turn it off at any point in time. Now that sounds like an obvious and foolish and weird thing to say. Here's my reasoning. Texas's offense in the last 6 games has been, shall we say, not up to standard all the time in the second half. So you might look up and Texas might have built a 21-3 lead, and it could be late in the second quarter. What you should know in the back of your mind that barring a collapse from Clemson's defense that, other teams haven't sustained against this Texas offense, there's going to be a run. There will be a run if Texas builds a lead. It's just a matter of how big that run is going to be. So according to our friends at FanDuel, Texas is favored by 11.5 points. I think that's too many. Clemson is not a great team. I don't believe the Tigers are good enough to win the national championship. I do believe they are good enough to win this football game, or at the very least, scare Texas. Clemson has made a habit out of playing 4-quarter football. Texas has made a habit out of playing 2, maybe 2.5-quarter football. Now, their defense tends to hang around for all 4 quarters, and it has played exceptionally well in the last few weeks. They only gave up 22 in overtime in the SEC championship game. They didn't give up any points because it was a pick 6, how Texas A&M got their lone touchdown. That was on the road. They gave up 14 to Kentucky, 10 to Arkansas, 17 to Florida, and 24 to Diego Pavia. He's back, by the way. I have some thoughts on that in a little bit. But I look at this Texas defense, and it has been what I thought it would be all year. Now, coming into the season, I thought, Texas will have a good defense. I watched them for a little while. I thought, that defense is really good. And I was saying since September, it's one of the most underrated units in all of college football. And Texas reminds me a little bit of Tennessee. You think of them because of their head coach and their quarterback, and the image you have in their mind of what they are. With Tennessee, it's explosive passing plays. With Texas, it's creative play calling and some explosive plays, but it's balance, screen game. They do all sorts of things with creative motions, and Sark will have a great game plan for this game, no doubt. But in reality, both of those teams are stronger and have been more consistent on the defensive side of the ball. So that's the most important unit here for Texas. Their offense, I think their offense is what it is. I expect them to be in the 20 to 30 range, nothing more. I think it's more likely they go under 20 than it is they go over 30 in this game. Because Texas scored over 30 against Florida. Well, that was at home against a team that had their defense on the field a lot because their offense couldn't sustain any drives because it was a fourth-string quarterback. The previous time that they scored 30 or more points was against Oklahoma. That was all the way back on October 12th. By the way, that Florida game was November 9th. So I don't think they put up 31 against Kentucky, but that barely counts. So the unnecessary stray that Kentucky catches on the show. When you look at the quality opponents that Texas has played this year, Georgia, 19 points. Texas A&M, 17 points. Even Arkansas is respectable, 20 points. Vanderbilt, 27. Georgia, 15. At Michigan, put up 31 earlier in the year. But is Quinn Ewers 100%? Is Isaiah Bond 100%? You've got the quarterback question. I just have questions about the Texas offense that if they answer, they win the game handily. If they don't, they're going to lean on that defense again, and I trust them against this Clemson offense. So I said about Clemson going into the ACC championship game, hey, this needs to be a Cade Klubnik game. He has to come out and play maybe his best football of the year. Oh, what do you know? Cade Klubnik against SMU went for 260 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and Clemson wins the game. Thus, here they are. I don't know what Clemson needs to look like because I trust this Texas defense. They have playmakers everywhere. The defensive line, it's nasty. It can be a force against the run. It can get after the passer. Then you have guys in the secondary like Andrew Makuba who are ball hawks and have taken the ball away against quarterbacks who have played well this season like Cade Klubnik, or guys who have even been more consistently on offense than Cade Klubnik this season. I think Klubnik overall has been good, but he's also had a couple of duds, as most guys do. So for Clemson in this game, I don't think there's one formula. I don't think there's one thing or key. It's just find a way. Maybe it's making plays on special teams. Maybe it's your defense giving your offense short fields with a turnover. Or maybe it's getting a couple penalties here and there. Or Texas makes a mistake you capitalize on. I don't get the sense that Clemson for 4 quarters without getting some breaks can just overwhelm Texas and win the football game. I do get the sense, and Vegas does as well, if Clemson shows up and plays a 4-quarter game, even if only 2.5 of those or 3 are good offensive quarters, they can go run away with this football game. So I think it's too many, though. I don't have a lot of faith in the Texas offense because of the injury concerns, because of the quarterback question. It doesn't feel like they're hitting their stride right now. We saw that against Georgia. We saw that against Texas A&M, quite frankly. They gave up 7 points. They only scored 17. Yeah, it's good enough to win the game, but I don't know if that's good enough to blow out Clemson here. So I think the Tigers are going to surprise those who think Texas wins big, and they'll hang around and keep it close. But they're going to need to pull the upset, which I fully believe they're capable of. They're going to need a couple of breaks. They're going to need to do things like win the turnover battle, a fumble that maybe gets punched out but bounces back to Clemson and results in something good for them later. Or Texas has a sloppy mistake or a key penalty here on 3rd down to keep a drive. It feels like that's what Clemson needs, but hey, it's college football. Wilder things have happened before. So I'll take Texas to win. I'll take Clemson to cover. I think this is a really kind of sloppy, ugly game. Texas 20, Clemson 10. You heard me right. 20-10. Final score, Texas moves on. Wanted to share a couple thoughts on Diego Pavia because the father of the state of Alabama is back because of a ruling that could have widespread ramifications. So Diego Pavia's lawsuit against the NCAA stipulated that he is being deprived playing at the JUCO level from financial opportunities otherwise available to him at the Division I ranks, and so he has been granted extra eligibility. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to pretend to know how this applies to the rest of college football. I'm just telling you to keep an eye on this, because you could suddenly have players get an extra year or two of eligibility. Like, what if they throw out JUCO years as a whole and say that's an extension of high school rather than your first 2 years of college? Suddenly you could have 6-year players without ever taking a red shirt. That feels excessive. That feels extreme. I don't know. Maybe that's where we're going. But Pavia back at Vanderbilt, Auburn and Alabama don't want to see that guy anymore. Well, the SEC is going to see him again. He's playing in a bowl game, and he's going to play in another season of college football. And you know what? Frankly, I'm here for it. I'm here for guys like Diego Pavia, who are not going to be first-round picks in the NFL draft, who are just kind of going through, and they just find ways to win. That guy's found a way to win plenty of football games. They take on Georgia Tech in the Birmingham Bowl. Should be a pretty good game. Should be a pretty darn good game. That's on December 27th. That is next Friday. So I'm intrigued. I'm really intrigued to see what comes next after that ruling. How much eligibility do guys get back? Just keep an eye. Just keep an eye. Keep a weather eye out on the horizon, Captain Sparrow, because that one's fascinating. But Diego Pavia still in college football. How about that? Speaking of still in college football, did you forget about Oregon State? Probably. Understandably so on the one hand. On the other hand, they just pulled off the most surprising quarterback transfer addition of the year. That's coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by the College Football Playoff. It's that time of year. The College Football Playoff, it's back. It's starting later today as this show airs, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever. Bring you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love, and it continues Saturday as well. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins Saturday, December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into the first matchup, SMU battling Penn State in Happy Valley. I think Penn State wins by double digits, but you'll just have to tune in to know if I'm sharp or dull. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. I'll be honest, everybody. I was stunned. I did not have Maalik Murphy to Oregon State in my mind. I talked about him on this show as a good candidate for Auburn. I thought about him as a guy who could go to Miami. He played Miami this year and did well. I didn't see any of it coming. Carter Baines, 24/7 Sports and Oregon State aficionado, joining me here on the show. And this is about as newsworthy of a move, non-realignment based, as Oregon State has had in the last 365 days. There are a lot of reasons to like this. Number one, gotta be a breath of fresh air and energy and oxygen to that Oregon State fan base that had a lot of it sucked out of them this year in a 5-7 campaign that started 4-1. You upgrade a position that was a glaring weakness all year long. You get the top available transfer quarterback, in my view, since John Mateer was already at Oklahoma. This says a lot about Trent Bray and Oregon State, Carter, and if you're a Beaver fan and you're excited, I'm here to tell you, you should be.
It's the first good news Oregon State's had in a long time. Like you said, it is a breath of fresh air in Corvallis, and one that I think Oregon State needed early in the offseason to kind of quell the negative momentum that came with missing a bowl game. Obviously you had that big Wazoo win late in the season, but to close the regular season on a loss, you miss a bowl game. You've got a couple of defensive guys transferring out. You kind of needed a win. And I think they got one in Murphy that can attract a couple of more transfers in, can keep some of those guys on board that maybe would leave later in the window or head out in the spring. I mean, we've seen guys, Damian Martinez comes to mind, commit to the program in the winter and then leave in the spring. Maybe having a standout quarterback like that keeps guys like that on board who might pick up interest from other schools. So I think the momentum shift and kind of the signal that, hey, next season you've got something to look forward to. I think that's big to get that this early in the offseason.
Yeah, and it just, he's got 2 years of eligibility left. I don't think it's crazy, Carter, to see him as a starter in Corvallis in 25 and 26, because you look at his arm and his physical traits. Yeah, he could project into the NFL at some point. He's about to go to a team, though, that isn't going to be on everybody's radar in a significant way, the way he would have been at Miami or Auburn or even Kentucky, which is another place where he took a visit. And then he's going to go to a system that isn't going to ask him to do even as much passing as he did this past year at Duke, where he had a great season. He was around 60% completion. He had a single season record for Duke touchdown passes this year. Like, he just did so many things right. And there are a couple questions that I have on this move that we'll get to in just a sec, but this is just such a huge pull for Oregon State to say that this guy went around to SEC schools and decided, I want to go to Corvallis. I want to go be Oregon State's quarterback for at least 1 year, maybe even 2. I think that speaks volumes about what Trent Bray is capable of doing from a talent standpoint and what he has already done since Jonathan Smith left.
Not only that, but from an NIL perspective, like, I don't know the numbers here, but to go and compete against SEC programs and to pull him from an ACC program, like, you've got the reaction nationally that I've seen from fans is, this is a step down. Why is he doing this? Like, why would you go to Oregon State over an SEC school? Why would you even leave Duke to go to Oregon State? Like, props to Oregon State's NIL department, props to Trent Bray for what he's built, props to Kevin Gunderson for the offense and his recruiting ability, because Oregon State just went toe-to-toe with a Kentucky team that's desperate for a quarterback that has whiffed 2 years in a row in the portal, an Auburn team that's going all in the portal, top 5 in the team portal recruiting rankings, and that needs quarterbacks, probably going to take 2 this cycle. They already have Jackson Arnold. And then they
took Ashton Daniels as well from Stanford.
Okay, yeah, there's the second one. And then, to go and get him from a Power 4 program in Duke. Like, obviously, I don't think this is a tampering situation. Oregon State was going into Duke and being like, hey, we're going to give you this offer, come play for us, because there was a period of about.
By the way, even if it was, who cares?
Yeah, but I think
serious question. If anyone out there hears, well, so and so tampered with, I got news for you. Every major college football program tampers at some level. It's happened before. Tampering can be something as innocent as you send a kid a text a day before he enters the portal when he's already got plans to. That could be tampering, but everybody's doing this stuff. I really don't care.
And this, I think, could be part of the reason. We don't know the full story here yet. I'm sure, once he gets on Corvallis, once he gets in Corvallis, once he talks to the media, some of this will come to light, as it did with DJ a couple of years ago. Duke, from the time that Maalik Murphy entered the portal to the time that Duke had a replacement in place, one day, I think 48 hours max, Darian Mensah was at Duke as a commit, one of the top portal quarterbacks out there. It makes you think maybe this was always in the cards, that Duke was kicking the tires on bringing someone in who they thought could bring something new to their offense, because Maalik Murphy, I'm not going to call him a statue quarterback, but he can make throws on the move, but he finished with negative rushing yards on the year. They're not going to run design running packages for him. Darian Mensah, on the other hand, very mobile, someone who can, maybe bring something to the Duke offense that they weren't getting from Murphy. Maybe they were kicking tires on quarterbacks. Murphy saw the writing on the wall and said, let's get out of here. If that's the case, again, regardless of why he left Duke, the fact that Oregon State's going head to head with some of these programs that, with rev sharing coming down the line, with NIL being what it is in the SEC, like, to go win a recruitment like that is impressive. No matter how you cut it.
I don't think Murphy is somebody who comes in and suddenly you talk about Oregon State as we did Washington State this year, which is, hey, if they go 11-1 with a tight Power 4 loss or a good, Boise State loss or something like that, could they get into the college football playoff? I don't think Oregon State can do that in 1 year's time. Could they do it in 2 years' time when the Pac-12 is theoretically rebuilt to 8 teams and at least has a conference championship to dangle as a resume builder to be one of the highest ranked G5 teams in all of college football? Yes. I think that's absolutely possible, and why I mentioned the 2 years component earlier. But let's look at the other side of this, Carter. This is just a huge move. The branding that it brings to Oregon State, the fact they went toe-to-toe with those teams, the NIL, it's all big, it all matters. Here are the questions I have. Duke had one of the most underrated wide receiving cores in all of college football. Duke was one of the most underrated teams in all of college football, who were 6-1 in one possession games, by the way, with Maalik Murphy at the helm. But Eli Pankel and Jordan Moore, those were a couple of really capable wideouts. And Oregon State's receiving core, I think, was one of those areas you looked at this season and said, boy, they need help. They need a lot of help in there. Where do you feel like reinforcements could come from?
They have two guys coming back that I feel really good about being strong weapons with Murphy. One, Trent Walker, a guy who is a possession first with sneaky speed, who I think can be that guy in the middle of the field that Murphy finds most of the time. He's probably going to be your leading receiver.
River Craycraft.
Yeah. Or like, here's a name out of the hat, a Timmy Hernandez type at Oregon State a handful of years ago. Possession first. He's always open. He doesn't drop passes. Like, that's Trent Walker. I think he is probably the go-to target for Maalik Murphy. And then Darius Clemens was someone who, when he came in as a transfer from Michigan, you felt like maybe he was going to be the guy. Took him a while to get healthy. He finally gets in the rotation, kind of underperforms. And then the Boise State game happens. And it feels like he's got all this momentum going into the offseason. And then he announces he's coming back. This is a former blue chip recruit who, get him in the open field, you let Maalik Murphy air it out. Maybe he's your big play guy. He's got some size to him as well. Maybe he can win some contested catches downfield. Maalik Murphy's got that arm. Maybe you see him thrive in a kind of an air it out scheme. So those two guys, I think, will benefit a ton from this move. And to an extent, Oregon State's passing game struggled because of its receivers. But if you bring in a quarterback who's better than what you had this year, maybe the quarterback elevates the receivers. So I think these things can kind of work hand in hand to where it's mutually beneficial for the receivers and the quarterback, and the passing game as a whole just takes a step up because you've got a better quarterback.
Yeah, and he's rumored to be favored as a Florida target, but a West Coast receiver who I would love to see at Oregon State is J. Michael Sturdivant, the transfer from UCLA. I mean, if you put him in there with Clemens and Walker, then I think you got some. But that piece on the outside, I think, is still missing for this offense to reach its full potential. But of course, what Oregon State runs is all rooted in the run game. So the offensive line, I think, had some moments this year. I don't think they struggled as much as the defensive line, but that's not saying a whole heck of a lot. How do you feel about that unit as it stands right now?
Well, it's going to be different. I mean, you lose Josh Gray, who set, I believe, the career record for starts or consecutive starts, or one of those, if not both, at Oregon State at left tackle, and then moved into guard. Going to be shifting guys around on the interior. It's a unit that when Jim Mahalichek was leading it as the position coach, you knew that it was going to be good year in and year out because he's such a good talent identifier and developer. Now that you have a new staff in and you're starting to lose the guys that Mahalichek brought in, this is kind of the prove it time for the offensive line, which has been probably the strength of the Oregon State football roster for the last 5 years, maybe longer. Like, I think that has to be a concern. The running backs are good. Like Anthony Hankerson, we saw this year, one of the more underrated running backs in the country as far as his yardage, his touchdowns. He was among the national leaders. And then Saladin Allah, who was your third stringer, steps up with Jam Griffin out. I think that two-headed monster can be yet another prolific backfield for Oregon State and take some of the pressure off of Maalik Murphy. But will it be as good if the offensive line's not as good? So now that the pieces are starting to fall into place, you've got your quarterback. I think you make a good point bringing up the offensive line, which we're not usually talking about in mid-December. I think that is now maybe the question of the offense.
Carter Baines, 24/7 Sports, and Beaver aficionado. Carter, enjoy it as always, my man.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.